Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Cadlow, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
Hey everyone, Brandon here. On today's episode of Strength Chat, we have Kirk Karwoski and his coach and friend, Marty Gallagher. Now, Kirk is probably best known for his 1,000-pound by 2 squat, multiple IPF World Championships, as well as USPF World Championships. Marty's probably best known as working with Kirk as his coach at Coan and many others of the late great era of powerlifting. In this episode, we talk about some of Kirk's more interesting and colorful stories in the weight room, what his training looked like, and some of Marty's experiences working with these other great athletes. Check it out.
Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength. That's right, myself, Chris Duffin. To my left, the wizard of training, the one, the only, Brandon Sen. And to my right, the man that cannot keep a window in the back of a car.
Or on the side.
On the side, whatever.
That one was a break-in.
All we know, Brady, is we give Andre here, our creative director, a lot of hard time about his driving skill. Yet for some reason, you seem to have more damage associated with vehicles. So Brady here,
Company damage, don't forget.
Brady here was hauling a load of bars, actually the transformer bars, big crate full of them down to get the black oxide treatment. Day before yesterday. Friday. Yeah. And we're. Hey, what'd you forget to do?
Neglected to strap it. I thought it'd be heavy enough.
And what happened?
So going down a hill, had to hit the brakes, and that pallet just tumbled forward right into the back window of the truck.
Nice blowing up.
Oh yeah, it just exploded behind me.
I can give you a hard time, but I've actually done that once before with a giant tractor tire in the back of my pickup. It flung up, and it's like just they literally blow up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the pallet was only about half full, so there was a lot of room for the bars to slide back and forth, which I think was the real culprit for the pallet tipping over rather than just sliding.
Well,
what was your immediate feeling as that exploded behind you?
Just like a big internal sigh. Because as I was leaving, I was like, maybe I should strap it, but...
So we do have other Brady automobile stories. I think we've told on the show perhaps before.
Probably once.
Like running through the middle of an intersection and me getting coated with Brandon's coffee. And I think you were denied like driving privileges for a while after that. Didn't we take?
Gave him back to the old man.
I think the odds are just stacked against me because I always get forced into driving somehow.
Well, that's because I'm not driving.
I know.
I got more important things to do than drive.
That's only 2 incidents. Not that bad.
So,
and you got the passenger window taken out.
Driver window. That got
driver
into at an Office Depot though.
There's so many things though, and then you ran over the pallet of shoulder rocks.
That was Andre.
We're not sure about that.
I don't know. It was you. It was an automobile and in your area, and damage was done. So at this point, you're pretty much taking responsibility for it. So
Jesse will testify on my behalf.
It is shifted. All right. Well, this conversation on vehicles will I'll shift it into our guests here in a second. But first, have we got a show for you today? We have both Kirk Karwoski and Marty Gallagher on the show. So one of the strongest men to ever walk the planet, as well as his coach, who was quite a competitive lifter as well, but one of the most prolific authors in the strength and conditioning community, with numerous national titles to his credit as a coach. Coached the IPF World Team, I think, back in the 70s. Coached so many.
No, wait a minute. 90s.
90.
Come on, man.
I think you got shifted with me. You telling the story about living on Clinton Street here in the 60s. Got my dates off. So, but God, coached so many great lifters. Mark Chalet, our mutual friend at Coan. He's a great friend of our friend, Dr. Stuart McGill, as well. So welcome to the show, Kirk and Marty.
you.
Thank you.
So
Be here.
I just want to start, since we're telling car stories to begin with. Marty, how much regrets do you have about that Lamborghini that you sold?
Now, how did you hear about this? This is blowing my mind, but it's a true story. Kirk, I don't think you ever saw this car. Had
I've heard it though.
It was a 1968 400 GT 2+2, 4-liter, 400 horsepower, 6 two-barrel side draft Webers. Now, if I had the car today, it's $1 million car. I sold it for $18,000.
Yeah, but back then, $18,000 was $500,000.
Yeah, well, no, I made $3,000. I was so proud of myself.
Somewhere out there, the guy who bought it's telling the opposite story.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you hear that story? That's crazy.
Actually, you told that to me. So
Did I?
Yeah.
Had I been drinking? I probably have been drinking.
I think I was telling you because I'm big into building vehicles and whatnot, and it just came up in conversation around. I think we were talking like, leverages for lifting, and the mechanical nature, and it drifted into automobiles.
Horsepower versus torque.
Exactly.
All right. The Olympic lifter versus the power lifter. Velocity, the Olympic lifter, right?
Yep.
Torque, grind, that's us. That's the power lifters. That's the absolute strength guys. Sustained strength would be like your strongman, maybe your kettlebell guys, right?
Yep.
So there's the way that we divide up the three strength divisions when we talk to wider audiences. Kirk works with me, and we do this with the military. We divide up the three separate types of strength.
So well, that's a good place to jump in. I mean, tell me a little bit about what you're doing there with those populations when you split that up, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, we're purposefully primitive.
I was just
minimalism.
I just pulled out. So for our audience that is not familiar, Marty's quoting, listing the title of one of his books, one of his better known books, The Purposeful Primitive, which I think was released in 2008, if I'm right.
Yeah,
so,
it's my magnus opus.
So tremendous, tremendous book.
But minimalism, whether it's in resistance training, whether it's in cardio, whether it's in nutrition, ultra basics. Seems like we spin the elite back to the ultra basics. Everybody's into the next, the newest, the latest. What's the latest measuring device? How do we put a more finite judgment on this athlete? And it's like, well, everybody's into, analysis, but how about the prescriptions? And we spin them back to those ultra basics that they likely forgot, if they ever learned them correctly to begin with.
Well, I think that's, an important piece. I was just touching base with Brandon before this podcast kind of about that concept, knowing that it would come up over the course of this. Trying to find that minimal effective, dose of, stress that we're gonna get adaptation from, and we hear this quite a bit from a number of, other sports areas outside of the U.S., but within the U.S., we definitely see this always. The trend is more is better. We're just going to beat you into submission, and the more work you can, that you can accomplish, the better off that you're going to be, which is not necessarily the case.
Ask Kirk how many times a week he squatted and how many sets he did.
Kirk, how many times a week do you squat?
Once a week, one all-out set.
Boom, done.
And if you screw it up, then you gotta have nightmares about it for the whole week till the next time you can redeem yourself.
Or you could commit suicide, do the right thing.
True.
I mean, if you have a bad training session, sometimes there's no other option,
If it's 2 weeks out from the Nationals, yeah.
How How long were your squat sessions like that, or how long was your squat frequency like that for?
Well, that's why you don't have bad workouts.
Hey, what was that, Coach Brady?
You got to speak up there, Brady. They can't hear you. You got to get close to the microphone.
I was right here. How long was your squat frequency like that for?
12 weeks.
Okay. And outside of those 12 weeks, was it more frequent, less frequent?
No, outside of the 12 weeks, it would be eights with no equipment.
Sure.
Working up to, at the end of that one, to do 10 pounds more than, to set a PR for sets of 8.
Mm-hmm.
So
like my best was 645 for 8, just with shorts and a t-shirt, and an Olympic bar, all 45s. Make it as hard as possible. Street shoes, and the next time, I wouldn't call it a bad workout, but the next cycle I went to 655, and I missed the 8th rep.
Loser.
So,
I'm sorry.
But then you're done with those. And it's time to change up and start moving to 5s.
So you did one top set of squats, and
Right.
you're highly revered as one of the best squatters of all time. What did the entirety of the rest of your training look like around that? Were you doing a lot of assistance work? I think the majority of lifters these days dream about going in, crushing one top set, and then going home. But for the majority of people, that's just not the reality for one reason or another. Walk us through what the entire scope of your training looked like in that 12-week cycle leading up to a competition.
Well, frankly, in the squat, I would try and do some leg accessory work. But what we found was it was just way too much of a waste of time to haul all of the weight from the power room over to the leg press or to wherever, because there was a time we had a big leg press, and I don't know what we had loaded up on it, but it wasn't heavy enough. So I had my big training partner fall 320 pounds of him climb on top of the thing, and banged out 8 reps, and it's I'm not going to get any strength out of that, and the whole endeavor was like doing cardio, hauling all that weight around. And so we just kind of gave up. I'd do some, one-legged extensions or curls, but it just got to be where, why am I wasting my time? I could be home eating and sleeping.
I also think
we came up with the term squat and leave. So it's squat and leave. And at the time, I had a very physical job. I was on my feet all day doing, production work on a concrete floor. And, that took a toll. It 5'8" and 280 pounds. So it was really more important for me to recover than to beat myself up even more.
So that's a great analysis there, Kirk, because I think so many people don't think about like all the rest of what's going on in their life. They think about this separation of here's my training time. And maybe I'm laying concrete as my primary job. Guess what? Your training's not going to look anything at all like somebody that is, that like let's say, they're an athlete that's paid to lift and don't have a job, or they're somebody that's put themselves in a field where they've got a gym or whatever it is, and they just don't have the either physical stresses or mental stresses, and it makes that all plays a role in your recovery. Exactly. You've got to incorporate that into that overall volume and what's happening during the course of the week for your recovery for the next session.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, that one all-out top set, we used that in the squat, we used it in the bench press, we used it in the deadlift, and it wasn't just Kirk and myself. It was Chalet. I mean, you talk to Ed. Ed wasn't doing. I mean, he would do his bodybuilding back off work, but he wasn't doing multiple sets of 5 in the squat or in the deadlift, which you're seeing nowadays, or multiple sets in the bench. We'd work up the one all-out set, and he'd do his back off sets. And Ed was actually a higher volume trainer than most of the guys of the era. You look at Mark Chalet was the minimalist of all minimalists. But it was self-justifying. We got results. You go for a 12-week cycle, hit every pre-appointed poundage, touchdown. we're the winner. Do it again. Now, we always sync body weight up with this. We were always looking to add size, okay?
So
That's critical.
What did your training? Did you look at what did your training look at like over the scope of let's say a year? Did you plan out like here's some of the specific big meets that we want to prep for?
Yeah, we went to nationals and worlds.
Okay. And so
and we were on for 12 weeks and all. Kirk on for 12, off for 12, right?
Well, yeah, but the only problem was after the nationals, you didn't have that full 12 weeks.
Right.
You know, you had a lot less time, so you'd have to jump in a little higher percentage, and just come through. And essentially, you were trying to just edge out what you did previously at the nationals, and then after the worlds, I used to take at least a month off. And I mean, I wouldn't even drive by a gym. I'd actually go around the block to not pass a gym, just as sort of a joke thing. But, I wouldn't go near the gym. And then it's time to, okay, let's start lifting and start, figuring out what's going on and when we have to really start up and start just plugging along again.
And we'd add body weight and gear the deeper we got into the cycle. Right? We'd create momentum. Yeah. We'd always start the cycle off light and ingrain technique. Now, we were IPF guys. We had to go below parallel in the squat. We had to pause benches. And for many years, there were no bench shirts. So we had to deal with that. So it was a tough sled. Usually the last 8 weeks of the 12-week cycle was when the real work took place. The first 4 weeks, you're just kind of getting tuned in and getting the rhythm of the whole thing. And also you're getting together with your boys. Don't underestimate that group training effort. That's critical. I mean, you lift with the best. Was awesome. It pushes, oh yeah, hell yeah.
So what does the training?
Better have your shit together.
How does this contrast with the training style that you incorporate for? Because I know both of you are involved with, and I know you can't speak to a certain level of it, but in dealing with special services, Navy, so on. But you're dealing with a population that isn't interested in just that maximal strength on the platform. So you've got more of a focus on, conditioning, recovery.
They don't want that. They don't want that from us. The only thing they want from us is they want one single thing. They want absolute strength. Now, Chris, if you were to go in with a bunch of guys that are 102% of their genetic potential and you wanted to build their leg strength, what would you have them do?
Well, a gram of testosterone.
And make them squat.
Exactly.
Yeah, that too. That would probably happen.
And because you know what? They don't know how to squat. They haven't been doing squats. They're confused. They think leg extensions and squats are the same benefit. You know what I mean? Kirk goes with me. We take him back. We show him how to bench. We show them how to deadlift without busting their backs in half. They don't know how to deadlift. It's like progressive resistance malpractice. We straighten their asses out. We keep them safe. These are thoroughbred race horses,
Yeah, I was guessing technique is a pretty piece that you spend quite a bit of time on and working with those populations.
And they're all weak when you make them do it right. It's great.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you start off, with no weight, nothing, just, having them, look like that toddler squat picture, the one that goes around the internet, the perfect squat. First, let's learn how to get into this position. Okay, now you can hold a kettlebell in front of you. Now you can do it with that. Now you can progress to a high bar. There's a whole progression. And by the end of that day, they're squatting correctly. Because unlike most of the lifters that you try to coach, these guys listen.
and we'll go in for 5 straight days. We'll deal an entire day just on legs, an entire day just on upper body, an entire day just on back. Then we'll spin to explosive strength, we'll give an entire day over to Olympic lifting, and then we'll do sustained strength. We'll have like Brad Gillingham do strongman, and maybe Phil Scarito do kettlebell, right, for the sustained strength. So that way, and we're there an entire week. So that way we give them the absolute strength, we give them the explosive strength, we give them the sustained strength. All that other stuff they get doing their job, like the cardio, all that, they're like, dude, we don't need your cardio, we don't need your nutrition. And they have staffs like you wouldn't believe, right, Kirk?
Yeah.
Oh. Nutritionists, psychiatrists, facilities, unbelievable.
And so the buy-in's pretty good.
Chiropractors.
The buy-in's pretty good from that audience for the coaching. It sounds like.
I've been going down there for 8 years.
Excellent.
They're buying what we're selling. We're getting them results. And again, it's just taking them back to those ultra basics.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. Kirk's comment mentioning something like that it's unlike working with lifters, which I think is, as coaches, we've all found that in dealing with our standard lifting population. Somebody says they want help, and then they don't listen, they don't adhere, they don't, and then come back later going, oh, my back hurts, whatever it is. And it's like,
what you get from them, I want your help. Okay, I'm helping you, do this, do that. Well, I saw on the internet. Get out of our room. Just get the fuck out. Go read the internet. Don't waste the air in my room. Go back to your internet if that's going to make you strong. That's the stance that we take.
No, it's pretty common. I mean, it's great that there's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of information out there, and it comes across all sources, and people just can't focus or discern and filter out what's usable and what's not. So,
well, they don't want to do the work, and they're impatient. I mean, I spent 20 years getting to where I got, and we had a system. I've worked it and worked it and worked harder and progressed. Everybody wants the new greatest thing. Well, I squat 400 now. I want to squat 700 in 8 weeks. And I don't know. I don't know what you're going to find pharmaceutically that you can even do that. So,
I love it. I get the Kirk. I've had probably a dozen different people like in some sort of conversation with me at reaching out for coaching or advice or this or that, and like, oh yeah, I've got a 500-pound or a 600-pound deadlift. I'm hoping in 2 or 3 years, my plan is to deadlift 1,000 pounds like you. And I'm like,
absolutely,
good luck. Like, you don't say it, but like, people like that just that doesn't happen very often. So, and it's not going to happen. Like, you're just delusional if you think that you're going to go from 600 or even 700 pounds that far in those kinds of time periods.
Right.
So, Kirk, with your training and in going up that one giant top set of whatever lift you were doing, it leaves fairly little room for error. You don't get the opportunity to make it up on your second set or third set if you mess up. So, walk us through a little bit of what your preparation looks like going into that, either from kind of what you're thinking about, any like visualization type stuff. Things you're doing outside of the gym to prepare for that one giant top set a week.
Oh, well, I was always sitting in, I could have been watching the video on a TV in my head over and over and over of what that lift was going to look like. I mean, just constantly on the way to the gym. I'm just picturing that top set. I can see there's 3 100s on each side. There's 2 45s. There's a 25 and a 5 in the big collars. And I'm going to go up and, I'm wearing this black suit, I'd already done it. So it was really, it was just watching the video. And what was cool was videotaping the workouts and going home and seeing just how friggin' close it was to what I pictured in my head going into the gym, and it usually was pretty on. I mean, occasionally you have, it's not, something goes a little wrong or that, but usually it was spot on. And actually, a lot of times the video at home in the VCR, to date it all, was better than what I pictured in my head. It's like, man, that was faster than I thought it was going to look.
Yeah.
So, it was just a lot of visualization and getting it ready. But, yeah, I was big on that.
And you're pretty
I dreamed it.
And you're pretty well known for your intensity going into training and squatting, deadlifting, or benching, whatever you're doing. So, Marty, how does that mirror, the Ed Coans, the Chalets? How does that mirror or contrast the way you kind of saw them training in the gym? Did you see a lot of similarities between these monster lifters back then?
Yes and no. Mark Chalet was physically one of the most imposing humans I'd ever seen in my life at his peak. 5'9", 280, veins all over him, had the widest shoulders I'd ever seen in a guy's hand. His huge hands, like there must have been 6'10" guy walking around with little tiny hands because Chalet got him. Right. And just meant for picking stuff up. Great squatter, great deadlifter. Pulled 880, weighing 265. Boom. Yeah. Back in the day. Mark was savage psycher, but Mark was like a prison gang leader. And he was so intense, but his intensity was manifested different. Ed was a quiet psycher, but as I've mentioned this before, if you'd been close to Ed when he was getting ready for a big attempt, heat would come off his body, literally heat, like you'd feel it. It's like, damn, what's that, right? And it was a thermogenic manifestation of a psychological state, right? And he's quiet, but I mean, he's like an atomic bomb. You're just like, ooh, okay. I handled him in competition for his two biggest meets when he totaled 2,400 at 220, and then when he posted the biggest total of all time at 242. I was his competition coach. One of the scariest moments of my life is when, right before the 2,400 meet, he came up and he said, "You're calling my attempts." Son
of a bitch.
What? He said, "Don't fuck it up, Marty."
I was waiting if he was going to add that part in. And don't fuck it up.
Story, man. Oh, my God. I think he missed,
There's some pressure.
He missed one squat. I actually think we missed the third squat. And the 900 deadlift was actually a second attempt. He had tried 920 in the third, but we kind of shot our psychological wad on the second. But, man, he was something. Kirk was a completely different psycher. Kirk was Viking berserker, over the top, crazy man. Kirk was a natural psycher. I think Kirk got more out of his psych than anybody I ever saw, with the possible exception of John Cuck, who Cuck was like a serial killer psych. I mean, he was insane prior to his lifting, but Kirk got the most out of his psych. I think he added a full 5% over his non-psych state. He was just so focused. He had an identical psych routine: 10 steps in this direction, turn, 10 steps back in that direction, have his headphones on, one song playing over and over, boom, 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 just getting more centered, more centered, more centered. Prior to a world record attempt, our job is to keep people away from him, because everybody wanted to become, hey, let me get a picture with the champ, just keeping people away. And he'd be like tears would be coming down his face, and people go, "No, Kirk is so sad." And I said, "No, he's ready to rip somebody's head off." Those are tears of pure rage, buddy.
We're keeping you away for your health and safety.
Yeah. Now, Kirk was an incredible psycher. And because of that, he was Sean Scully, who was the U.S. coach for 5 World Championship team, 5 IPFS. Kirk was by far and away the most exciting lifter he ever saw lift. The Europeans went crazy for him.
Yeah, it's
unbelievable.
That's probably why it's hard to find a person that hasn't watched Kirk's squat videos. So, just the intensity is just palpable. Coming through the screen, it's pretty amazing.
Well, I'll throw this up to either one of you.
You guys, I'm like a toad right now. I am just all bumped. Every hair on my body's standing up. I'm ready to go out in the garage and lift. I've got to go.
What day's your training day this week, Kirk?
I'm lifting with Marty on Sundays.
Excellent. What just shift gears? I mean, what does your guys' training look like today?
Right now it's Sunday squat, bench, deadlift.
Yeah. We have a group of local guys that, in order for them to get the benefit of mine and Kirk's coaching, they squat, bench, and dead one time a week, and they don't do nothing during the week. And every one of them is like just making incredible progress. And we only have time for one set. It's like work up top squat next, boom, boom, boom. And what do we go up to, Kirk? 10 guys, I think, right?
Yeah.
And again, we're putting them on the psychological spot. The 5x5 guys, I mean, you get 5 chances to get it right. When you're showing up to lift in front of Kirk and Marty, you better have your shit together, okay? And we're not asking you. We pre-planned all this stuff with these guys. We know everybody's capabilities, right?
Yep.
So we're working with them, but we have expectations, and each week they're expected to meet those expectations. And most alpha males do. They will rise to that expectation if you put it on them. But you need to put it on them.
And if they fuck up, we'll make them stand outside in a timeout.
Why are you guys laughing?
I'm not kidding.
I'd probably do something similar.
We're laughing because we believe you're not kidding.
Get your ass outside.
We lock them out when they show up late. Yeah.
So I remember
in February they get locked out. You show up 1 minute after 9, that door is locked.
Be outside all day. I remember watching a video, Kirk, of you talking about kind of reserving the squat rack at 5 p.m. every day, and if a guy was in there, you would give him a 5-minute warning, and if he wasn't out of there by that 5 minutes, you were going to throw a 45-pound plate at him. What other kind of crazy stuff like that went on back in the day?
Well, sometimes I wish I hadn't told those stories, but well, now quite honestly, okay, did those things happen? Yes. Did they happen often? No. When I got to the gym, I was already, the hair on my arms was standing up, and I really didn't have any words to come out of my mouth. I wanted to get back in that room. I was stomping and snorting. I'd have my bag and my belt in my hands. I'd push the door open with my foot and walk in, and the little front desk girls, they didn't ask me what's your member number, and this is none of that. I came in and I wouldn't even make eye contact with anyone, and I'd just come in and I'd throw my bag down and go change, and it was time to get started. Even my Marty would show up, and or Big Bob, and it would be. You'd make a quick eye contact, a nod, and not a word. There was nothing to say. We all knew what was going to happen that day.
And we're jacked too.
Yeah, they're due because they're training too.
Yeah.
And so they're at that same level. We don't want to talk.
No.
There's nothing to talk about. Let's tear this shit apart.
Yeah, let's tear this shit apart.
Everybody was on board. Those, events. This is my squat rack shenanigan. Then you got a guy for 4 weeks in a row who's told, hey, man, you need to be done by now. Okay. That 4th week, did that bar get grabbed and thrown across the bench that was behind the squat rack? Yeah. But like I say, generally, and even through the workout, there weren't shenanigans. We were there on a mission. So there wasn't room for shenanigans and bullshit. And everybody that was in there was in the same frame, same mindset, because as we would come in, you would see people kind of hurrying up to finish their workouts to get out. And another group of people from the other room were finishing their stuff to get in. So there was a migration. They're like, oh, God, here come the crazy fucks. Let's get out of here. So for that group. But then the other crazies were coming in. So everybody in the room knew what was what. And, like Marty said, my thing, I'd have my Walkman on, and I'd have my pacing spot. And I walked back and forth and just got tighter and tighter in my head and did what I do to myself to get myself that raged up. And we lifted. So, there really weren't a lot of shenanigans and
Can I interject one thing?
Yes.
Now this he's relating for you something a little bit later in his career. I'll relate something a little bit earlier in his career. When he was still training at Mark Chalet's, one time I came into Mark's gym, and Mark goes, "Come here." He said, he gets me in close. He goes, he's crazy. He says, come here. And he takes me to the back and he points. And Kirk is sitting in a folding chair in the dark. He has a 100-pound plate in his lap. He's got his headphones on. He's listening to music. He's bopping back and forth, and he's stroking the 100-pound plate. 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 And I left, and I guess he kept going. Kirk, do you remember that?
I remember that.
Did it help?
You know what?
It helped. I
you
think
know why?
I crushed it. Whatever the weight was that day, it worked.
I felt sorry for those weights. I was consoling them before I went at them.
I found if you intimidate the weights and they know that you're the boss, they will respond better. So I like to make sure that they know their place. But I haven't tried the persuasion, softening them up first. So I'm gonna give that a try.
Marty's talking about when I was still a teenager, and
Marty,
and I think I squatted 800 that day for the first time.
We know a lot of young men are going through a lot of changes as teenagers, and the room was dark. Are we sure that was a 100-pound plate on his lap that he was stroking?
I don't think it was a pitch black room. I think it was a dark corner. But if I was getting
is
that
not
weird,
a closet pervert.
I'm pretty public about it.
He's been out for quite a few years now.
I think that.
But also, see, when I used to play games like that and do those things, my training partners would come in and go, what the fuck? And I would charge them up so much that I could feed more off of them. Right?
That totally
when your training partners are totally losing their minds, you are too. So the more I can make them crazy, the crazier I can be.
And they were already
and that was a good
of the way there anyway, because they were all either cops or criminals. Oh my God! When you see your ex-training partner on Gangsters, America's Most Wanted, he's got his own segment. One of your ex-training partners.
Yep.
It's like, okay. Yeah, Chalet's gym was quite notorious. It was like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca.
I think the big, as I'm listening to that story, I'm thinking, just about how much today that there's a lack of focus on, the moment, the being in the now, and you in the weight. And you see, like, all the great lifters are there, and they live
stepping
that.
up and stepping up in front of your boys. You step up in front of your boys. You have your boys, and you step up in front of them. That's, I think, critical.
Yep. It's all about what's going to be cute and funny for the camera or this or that, and, like, losing the focus on being in the now. Like, right now, it's me and 800 pounds on that bar, and that's the only thing that matters. I've got to hit that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would approach it any other way. I don't know.
I don't either.
That's what's best.
Yep.
That's the best part of the whole thing, is for that moment in time when you're, okay, it's time, and you're heading to that bar, and you're starting to set up. The fucking universe stops. And that moment takes on its whole own life. When I watch old videos of training tapes, it's like those moments, that's a whole little world in its own self, because there was nothing else going on but that.
And I think that's one of the great things that we miss about lifting sometimes. We think about, the training program and, this and that, nutrition, but, like, it can be that experience of removing yourself from, all the other things and just living right then in that moment. Like, it can bring that to you, and that's a tremendous thing. But you've got to have something that's scary, real in front of you to bring you to that state. You're not going to get there for a set, warm up set with 225.
Let's change an old phrase. Oh, you've got to stop and smell the roses. Oh, fuck that. Let's stop and smell the ammonia.
That's a good one.
Stop and smell the ammonia.
Yep.
I like that one. I just thought of that too. I swear to God.
We're gonna
it
steal.
Just came to me.
We're gonna steal that from you.
Here's a T-shirt. But yeah, you're right, because people are so distracted, and it's like, no, you need to focus on this right here. And everyone's heard my famous 20-second quote.
I want to hold it.
I'm hearing. You haven't heard my 20-second quote?
I think Brandon was going to repeat it, but let's have you repeat it for our listeners that may not have heard it.
Well, essentially somebody comes and it's like, well, I don't know how I feel today. And it's like, if you can manage to keep your head out of your ass and totally focus and do everything right and not make any mistakes, no fuck-ups, for 20 seconds, you'll make that lift. No mistakes and totally focused. You'll make it, unless you do something stupid like call for 1,000 pounds when you're a 500-pound squatter. But
right.
if you're doing what you've trained to do, the only reason you're going to miss that weight is because you make a mistake, not because you're too weak. I mean, I look at any of the lifts that I ever missed, and it's like, this is what happened. It wasn't a strength or weakness. It was, I made a mistake. My head went down. My elbow came up, whatever.
But despite the poundages that he handled, he was always realistic of his capacities and his capabilities, as was Ed Coan, as was Doug Furness, as was all the great lifters, Danny Austin of that day. You were very realistic in assessing your own capabilities, and that made your period. They'd go through entire 12-week periodization plans and never miss a lift, never miss a single rep. Every lift, every week that they pre-planned, they made. But it might take them 10 years to get there. Right. And we would go off during the year. We would have off seasons. I think a lot of lifters nowadays stay on. We try to get away from the core lifts a little bit. That way, when we came back to them in the power cycle, they would be fresh to us. Right. If you just keep pounding away at the lifts year round, and man, I saw something horrible on YouTube today. Somebody sent me a photo of a kid doing a box squat, and it was just I just wanted to call him up and say, stop from doing that. It was malpractice, and so much of it is going on out there, and it's a real problem, and there doesn't seem to be any standardization of the teaching practices, and it's screwing up a lot of these kids. It's an issue.
We are 100% behind you on that one. I mean, that's why we do what we do, and we get out there and we teach teachers. Try to get as many people in the field as possible that are coaching.
These football coaches are out of control, man.
To move right, man.
Man, it's just like these football coaches. They think they really know what's going on in terms of strength training, and it's bad out there. They're hurting people right and left, and it gives us a bad name because done right. I was schooled right by a world champion from the time I was a young man, and so I got my techniques learned right from the start. I've had no injuries because I was trained right from the start, and it bulletproofed me, and that's the kind of training that we need nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, that's people think of it that when an injury happens, it's an accident. It's like, no, it's not an accident. There is a cause for that injury, and you need to understand why.
Yeah.
Because if not, it's gonna happen again, or something else is gonna happen that's related from the same.
You're straight outside the technical motor pathway.
Yep.
Now you put your spinal system at risk.
So, Marty, you've been writing for quite some time. I know that you've got 5 different books out there. I've heard a new one on the way, and I've got over 1,000 published articles. Across a variety of platforms, but you're writing. You're currently writing again, right? So it's the Raw Weekly column on Iron Company.
Yeah, I do a weekly column where I just kind of riff on anything that comes to my mind. It could be anything from I don't know. It could be anything from Coltrane to front squats. You know what I mean? Whatever. I get 52 shots a year, so it's. Fill it with whatever comes into my head. And it's a good sort of a data dump for the past 55 years. So many things that are coming up that I'd even forgot about. Like I used to have conversations with Paul Anderson. I mentioned that to somebody the other day. They said, oh my God, it was like I talked to Moses. Right. Right. And I said, yeah, I used to talk to Paul Anderson. They go, what? Well, you should write about that. And I said, I should.
Yeah, I probably should.
I should.
That is a good idea. That is a good idea.
Because you know what? He was a smart guy, and we had some good talks. But things like that. Like I did something the other week on Carl Norberg, great old. John Grimmie called him the strongest natural man he ever saw. And it's just like, boom, these things just, they need to be committed because I feel like, I don't plan on checking out anytime soon, but I think that there's a lot of this knowledge that's just going to disappear. Bill Starr's dead. So many of the old timers are passing on, and this knowledge is just disappearing. There was a lot of good knowledge out there that's just gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate those endeavors. I've always enjoyed your writing. It's been really good. And Kirk, you have a signature training bar that's come. Has it come out yet, or is it on to be released?
We're still tweaking it. J.P. Bryce and Iron Company and I, we wanted to come up with a bar that. I don't know. There was a bar that the bars that I used to train with, and the current ones just don't feel like that anymore. So this will meet all the IPF specs and all that good stuff, and we're pretty close. We're just doing a couple final tweaks on it. So we've been playing around with it. I'm trying to see if I can do some damage to it in my geriatric years here.
Well, it sounds like you guys are still hitting it and coaching people as well. So I love to hear it. And honestly, the stories today, you were talking about the hair standing up on your neck. They were standing up on my neck, and I'm going. I'm ready to get out there and tear some weights up. So
that's what it's about. That's the fun part of it. If that all wasn't there, I don't know that I would have done it. I mean, when I was a little kid, at 8 years old, I wanted barbells. And then the Incredible Hulk came out, and I'm like, I have to have barbells. And I always wanted to lift weights, but then as I got into it, that excitement, that was a drug. I mean, there was nothing that ever made me feel that good. It's just a lot of fun when you get that into it.
I'm there with you. And don't forget, stop and smell the ammonia. So.
Stop and smell the ammonia. If nothing else came out of this conversation, there's a new saying.
Hey, if you guys don't mind, I just want to reiterate, we're at ironcompany.com for the both the column and also the bar when the prototype is done and when we get that thing squared up. Look for it there. We're doing good work over there, trying to spread the word.
How about any social media between you two?
Kirk.
No, not.
I kind of had a feeling, but that's part of.
Somebody hacked my Facebook and pretended they were me, and then I'm getting phone calls from all my friends saying, man, where are you talking all this shit? And ever since that fiasco, I've been kind of like, I only do a little bit.
Kirk, by the way, I was one of the people that whoever hacked it was talking smack to. So there was like, I open up one day and I'm like, Kirk Karwoski is like talking shit to me, and I'm like, what did I do? What did I do?
Well, and as I publicly apologized that it happened, it had nothing to do with me, but I felt really bad because I had some people call and they're like, man, my girlfriend's crying, and I'm like, dude, in any of my history, the one thing I've learned, I never badmouthed anybody on there. But then, this clown, and from my understanding, somebody figured out who it was, and a couple of guys went and gave him a visit. Back him around a little bit.
Mob style.
I was real happy to hear that.
Allegedly.
I think I posted, if whoever told me who it was, I'd send him a DVD.
That's funny. There's rarely justice for that kind of thing. That's awesome.
I completely forgot about that happening, actually, until you just brought that up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember. And then I started reading through. They were just going off on me. And I'm like, it took me all of about 30 seconds, though. Like, I read through it a couple times. I'm like, that's not Kirk. I'm like, I don't know Kirk personally, but I know that that's not him.
What did the message say that he sent you?
I don't even remember. This was a few years ago. I've completely forgot about it until just now. So,
Chris, all your squats are high and I'm stronger.
Yeah, it was. It was something along those lines.
I competed the IPF. You didn't.
All of it. Yeah. See, I learned, I never talked to any, I posted some stuff and made some generalizations about some topics. But, I'm not going to call anybody out on that. You're just asking for trouble, So, but yeah, that guy got his, so that was cool.
That is good.
Or hers, but I doubt a chick would have done that.
A good ending to that story.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting close to wrapping it up. Brandon, you got any last words before we close out the podcast?
No, I want to thank you both for taking the time to chat with us. I know that we've all been a fan of both of your work. Kirk, you as an athlete, Marty, you more so as a coach. But it's always awesome for us to listen to some of the stories of the past that we otherwise wouldn't get any exposure to. And I think we all kind of wish for a time that was a little bit more like that, but. Maybe with less of the plate throwing at us.
I can do that. I can do that for you.
Yeah, I have a few stories about Chris in that I'll probably tell in 20 years to the new generation, but I'll save that for another day. But anyway, guys, I really want to thank you for chatting with us today. I know we all really enjoyed it. And for all of our listeners, as always, head to kabukistrength.com for all your coaching needs and kabuki.ms. That is soon to be moved to kabukistrength.com for all your movement needs.
All right. Thank you. And we're out.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, Dan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. And Marty, I'll get in contact with you. Oh.
We still on?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I'll get in contact with you about the bar, Marty. So
I'd like to.
I'll shoot you an email. So
I'd love to see that. Also, this might be something that that JP might be interested in. He's our he's a guy from my neighborhood who became successful as a West Coast equipment distributor, and I think he does pretty well out there. He'd probably be a good guy for you to know anyway, because he's in the equipment distribution business.
Okay.
I don't really know that much about it, but you know, he's a good dude, and he's been in business for a long time. He's one of us. He's a real lifter. But I know he's always on the lookout for new and innovative stuff that's not gimmicky.
Yeah,
So I'd love to take
this. This
is
is one of a kind, and so like I said, Stu's a huge fan of the bar. So
and he's tough, man.
Yep,
he's tough.
He doesn't just fanboy over anything. So I was really
not at all. I'd love to see that. That'd be good.
All right, we're going to check out.
I appreciate it.
Good talking to you again.
Thanks, Marty.
Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you.